Hello and welcome back to the FUMMINS build. So we are really getting pretty close to getting this thing done. We've got a ton of the work out of the way. We really don't have a whole ton left to do. I know everyone says that at every point in the project, but we really are getting there. So it may not seem like it, being as the cab is still off, but we have one actual project that's super simple, two things to tidy up, and then the cab can go back on. There's not really anything else we need to do with the cab off, and we can move on to all the stuff with the cab on, which is really the finishing touches. I mean, wiring harness, getting the engine running, cooling system, radiator hoses, all the knick-knack stuff of putting it back together. So really the next big milestone, and really to me the last milestone, is going to be getting the engine running, getting the wiring harness in, getting all that stuff sorted out, everything jiving with the Ford, and getting it running. But again, we do have one small project to do with the cab off before we get there. So what we got to do is a fleece coolant bypass. So basically there's a design flaw with the Cummins. Autos are like this too, actually. Coolant will sit in the around the number 6 cylinder. So you'll lean out the number 6 cylinder before anything else because it'll get really hot there. The coolant will just kind of sit and circulate there instead of circulating through the entire engine. So this is supposed to cure that. The other thing is this factory cooling setup we have here with those hoses and this hard line going over here. This originally went to a torque converter cooler, which you obviously don't have anymore, and it's a janky setup, and it hits the cab. And so we're gonna not only clean up the bay and make this whole thing nicer, but also from the reliability aspect, we're going to solve the problem. So definitely a much needed upgrade. Should be a pretty simple project. So yeah, let's dive in. All right, first thing we need to do is get this massive, ugly hodgepodge of heater lines off. That's how you know it's been changed at some point not too long ago. If you're ever trying to remove a stubborn hose of any sort, you know, a hose that slides onto something, give it a twist. And usually, especially, you know, if they're old, that'll just kind of like break that seal that they build up. All right, cool. We gotta plug this with the supply cap. We're just gonna take this, it's gonna replace basically our hard line that came out here. All right, now we gotta pull our thermostat housing off. Well, we should probably order and replace a thermostat. So when we put this back together, we'll put it back together loosely, and I'm gonna order a thermostat. People always wonder why building stuff takes so long sometimes, and I mean, it's pretty much it right there. You know, you think you got what you need. I mean, granted, lack of foresight, I should have thought about that. Oh, I'm taking the thermostat housing off. I should probably replace the thermostat. But, you know, you don't think about it. Then you're doing it, and you're like, oh crap, I need a thermostat now. So you gotta stop, go to the parts store, whatever, if you can get it at the parts store, or you gotta order it and wait for it to come in. Now we move to the rear. So we gotta knock this freeze plug out. Oh, you know what, before I do that, I'm sure this is gonna fit. Oh no. Oh no. Dang it. This isn't gonna fit with our trans option. Reason number 2, why builds can take so long. It's obviously supposed to go like this, but with our 5R110 Ford trans, she ain't gonna fit. All right, so since we're not able to use the fleece coolant bypass, I just decided to do a little block off basically. So this is where it would go over to the passenger side. This is where it goes to the heater core. So we need this, don't need this. So I just welded a cap on there. I threw some paint on there. But once the paint dries, I'm gonna go ahead and throw a rubber cap on there as well. I didn't wanna just rubber cap it because they can crack and leak and pressure can blow them off. And I prefer to weld it. I can weld, it was easy enough, so no reason not to. So let's get this back in. Whenever you're doing something like hose clamps and you're doing it, let's say on the engine stand or, you know, somewhere where you can easily get to it, you always want to pay attention and think about, you know, how would this be a good location to get a wrench in or pliers in or whatever on the vehicle, because sometimes you can put it in a spot where it's easy to get to when it's not on the vehicle, and then you need to take it off later and you kind of screw yourself. So all right, that's back on. The only other thing I wanted to do with the cab off is the return line. However, my fittings got delayed coming from Amazon. I had to order 2 from Amazon and they got delayed. So, I mean, we can do that with the cab on. And basically, my idea now, originally I wanted to finish this stuff up, bolt the cab back on permanently. But I think the better plan is gonna be to just set the cab on temporarily. That way we can do our wiring, get all that stuff sorted out. And then the procedure for doing the head studs, you're supposed to torque them, put everything together, run the engine up to 180-degree oil temp without coolant in it, and then re-torque them once everything's been heat cycled and reset the valve wash. So doing that is going to be significantly easier with the cab off. So we'll just set the cab on temporarily, get this thing running, and then we can easily pull it back off, do what we need to do, set it down permanently, finish up the cooling system, the intercooler, all that stuff. So yeah, moral of the story, we're going to set the cab down now and start diving into the wiring. My plan is to strap the cab to the chassis. Now the reason for that, instead of bolting it back up, is basically the mount bolts that go through the body mounts into the cab itself. It's a nut and then like some stamped steel holding the nut from spinning, and they like to spin. I had 4 or 5 of them spin. So the more times I take them in and out, the more chances that all of them are gonna spin, and it is quite difficult to get to the top of them. You gotta pull the carpet up and it's kind of a mess. So I'm just gonna strap it to it so we don't have to deal with the cage nuts spinning again. I think that's the best call, I don't know. All right, the cab is back on and mostly lined up. We got the lift arms out of the way. I mean, it's nice to see it like this. Makes the project feel closer to being done, you know? Having the cab back on it, really, you're like, oh man, like, it's a truck. It's not just a freaking frame with an engine in it, it's actually a truck. That's right, I almost forgot. All right, so one thing I want to knock out real quick, because it'll be easy, clear parts off the workbench, is our air horn. I know that sounds weird, that's what it's called though. So this is our factory one, and I painted it wrinkle red and bought this billet grid heater delete plate. This one would go on here like moi, and then getting intercooler piping to there with the air box and the coolant tank, which sits like right here, very difficult. So instead, with the DCS swap kit, we got this industrial one. So it's gonna sit like this going forward instead of sideways like that. It'll make our intercooler piping a lot simpler. So also came with a billet grid heater delete plate. We don't need a grid heater. And we have these 2 fittings, adapter fittings to go in here to adapt our map sensor and such. Then we're gonna bolt this on and then move on to our wiring. It's always so satisfying peeling tape off something. All right, well, this is how the air horn is gonna go. Normally this would be a grid heater, so it wouldn't look so weird having a spacer and a spacer, and that makes the 6.4 intercooler pipe like almost a direct fit. The only thing is I need to track down some longer bolts. None of the bolts I have that I can find are long enough to go through both the spacers and into the intake plate here. But anyway, I mean, that's what it's gonna look like. It's kind of crazy how much it tidies up this engine even more, being an inline 6. Before you've got this massive thing hanging off over here. Now it's... I got what are supposed to be 100mm long bolts, and they must not be 100mm long bolts because they are not threading in. All right, well, we're gonna come back to this. I also need to weld this hole shut because we're not gonna use it for anything, and if we do, we'll just 1/8 MPT tap it. So, I mean, this is gonna have to come back off anyway. I just kind of wanted to get it on there for now while we do our wiring routing and stuff, so we know where it is, basically. But yeah, we're gonna have to go get even longer bolts because those are not the right bolts. They're 90mm instead of 100. So anyway, let's move on. Wiring. All right, well, I've had a slight change of plans. Circumstances changed, thought about some things. So, like I said, my original plan, well, my second plan was to set the cab on like this temporarily, whatever, take it back off to do the retorquing of the head studs. I'm sitting here thinking about it and going through kind of the wiring stuff and what I need to do there. And there's a lot of stuff I have to hook up that I'll have to go right back and unhook to pull the cab off. And I couldn't route anything properly because I got to pull the cab off. It just kind of was going to be a lot of stuff having to do it halfway just to do it again. And I was like, you know what, let's trial run this. My thought was it would be really hard to retorque the head studs or do the injectors in the truck, so let's trial run it. So I pulled the valve cover off, and honestly, especially with no radiator in here, which we're definitely gonna fire it up without the radiator and stuff in here, I mean, it's really not bad. The hardest thing to get to is that very back feed tube, but it's totally doable. I can get a socket on all the head studs. So after thinking about it, there's not really any reason not to just bolt the cab on permanently. Worst case, if we have to unbolt it and disconnect the stuff and lift it back up, we do, so be it. But we might as well get it bolted on permanently and hope it stays there. So the other big factor here is the fittings I was waiting on are here, and I have my line for these. So I'm still missing the adapter fitting to the tank. That hasn't got here yet, but I have the fitting at the engine. This screws onto that and goes to rubber hose. Rubber hose I have all the way back, rubber hose to this, and then we just have one more fitting to add on the tank, which having the cab on or off doesn't really affect that. So I'm gonna lift this thing back up, knock out that return line, put the S&B cab mounts back in, and we're gonna bolt it on permanently, which is pretty exciting. Cab going back on permanently is a big step, so let's get to it. But it pays to have stuff like this because I didn't have to wait for this to come in. It's ironic because I ordered these fittings last because I was like, instead of a 90, I should really use a straight. And I ordered these and they came in first before anything else did. I'm gonna take this off actually so I don't tweak this line too much. All right, it's on. Yeah, straight was a good call. I think that's gonna work out a lot better. All right, now we just gotta route it. All right, that worked out great. I was able to use the factory clips and just pop the line right into them, which is what I was hoping I could do. I did still throw a zip tie on it midway, just in case. But once I've got to drop the tank halfway out to get to the top connector and stuff. When I do that, I can run it the rest of the way, boom, and just right up there. It'll be really nice and clean. It won't pop out from under the truck at any point. It'll stay inside the frame rail all the way to the fuel hat where it returns. So, sweet. Okay, cab mounts. Just take 2 seconds, and we're putting the cab back on, ladies and gents. All right, cab mounts are in. Time to drop her back down and try to bolt her up. Hooray! All the cab bolts are in. They're all snugged up. I still have to torque them all down, but I don't want to do that yet because I still kind of want to shimmy the cab around a little bit if I can. But it's pretty well lined up. All of them went in. Those S&B cab mounts with new bolts were a lot easier. I didn't have any issues with them spinning or anything like that because it gets far enough in before it hits the Loctite to not spin the nut. Anyway, it was a lot easier. They all went in without spinning, so that's sick. A success, man. We got it lined up pretty good. It seems like it's a little off to the right, so like I said, I want to jimmy it around some, but it's on and it's fully bolted down, and that is a huge moment for me, you know, to have this thing. It's like it's a truck again. It's not a rolling chassis with a cab up above it. It's a truck that's together with the cab on it, engine in it, you know. So it's the buttoning up stuff now. So I'm excited. So Anyway, that being said, let's get back to work. All right, we gotta get our 3 big chassis plugs reconnected. All right, chassis plugs connected. Let's see what else we got. Slid the steering shaft in. I still gotta put the bolt in that. This is one of our heater hoses, which we're not gonna use this factory one. We need to pull it off because it crosses all the way over. So I'm just trying to kind of tidy up any of this little stuff here and there. So when we route the harness, we're not routing it under or over things that need to get moved and things like that. So I'm trying to just kind of sort all this out. Obviously I can't reinstall all of it. Like there's a battery box that goes here, a coolant tank. This obviously mounts to the radiator area, things like that. But I want to try to get it sorted. It's kind of tricky because it was a bit ago when I took this thing apart, so trying to remember where everything goes. All right, well, I did manage to get the stock power steering line hooked up. It goes from here, goes from hard to soft to hard line to soft to hard at the very end, but it goes in here. And I got both these hydraulic hoses hooked up to the hydraulic boost brake setup. So anyway, moral of the story is I got the stock line to work, which I'm really happy about because this is where the pump sat before. Now we're like down over here. And so the fact that we could get it to fit is sick. This is the only ugly part. So I'm just gonna kind of add a bend and try to essentially bring this part down so it's kind of more of a straight shot. And if I really hate it, I'll deal with it later. But I've got to keep reminding myself this is a truck. You know, this isn't a race car that's gonna come apart a million times. So that I'm trying to make the engine bay look like a show car. I mean, it's a truck. It needs to work. It needs to be functional. And really, you know, that's it. Aesthetics are really the last thing as far as the engine bay. Functionality is key. You understand. The difficult part about this is there's already so many little bends. There's like one there, one there, one there, one there. So like I need it to go this way, but if I try to bend that on this bend, which is kind of where it was bending, it's probably gonna kink it. So we can't really bend it there. I mean, I guess we could bend it up here. Just look nicer if we could get it bent further down. All right, I think for now, that's how it's gonna be. I was able to get the plastic clip to kind of mount in here. We'll secure it other ways and make sure that there's no interference where it's rubbing metal on metal or anything. We don't want them to get rubbed through. But my thought was I could bend it down, go under the steering shaft, but then I'm in the way of my fuel lines. And it's like right there, it's not in the way of anything. Yes, it's not pretty, but I think it's, I don't know, it's the most functional for reusing the stock line. Ideally, we'll get a line made with that fitting, and just, you know, like a standard hydraulic hose that's soft all the way through and easy peasy. But for now, we're gonna let that ride. Don't judge me. Moving on, wiring and associated items. So we've got this wiring harness from Diesel Conversion Specialists. So they're the ones who make the entire swap kit that we use. And one of the things they offer is a conversion service. So I sent them the Ford harness, I sent them the Dodge harness. They made them both one big plug and play harness. We'll have to hook up a few things like power and ground and stuff. But for the most part, this is a straight plug and play harness. Everything is labeled, which is really handy. To give you an instruction booklet with the harness, we have this swap helper tack adapter. So we need the tack to interface from the Dodge to the Ford because the Ford transmission relies on the tack signal to figure out shift points and things like that. So it's very important that we have this hooked up. Got this with the swap kit. We have a throttle pedal module. The Ford has an electric throttle. The Cummins has an electric throttle. This stuff will get those two to interface. So anyway, I think I want to start running the harness first, routing it, mounting it, hooking it up. So let's get into that. All right, we're gonna start with the main connector here. And we should be able to figure everything out from there. All right, so here's where we're at. We've got most of the Ford stuff hooked up. You can see the AC high pressure switch, the Ford oil pressure sensor, Ford coolant temp sensors, which we put into the Cummins. We've got most of the Cummins stuff semi-routed up. hooked up to the ECU down here, mounted in kind of the factory spots with these clamps. But yeah, most of this stuff is routed. I got a hook. Where did it go? Fuel control actuator. Plug that guy in. We got our crank sensor plugged in. We got our swap helper here. This is like our TAC conversion box basically. So it comes pretty much pre-wired. There's this, which is a diagnostic thing to program it. And then this will plug into our harness coming off our crank sensor. So that's easy. We just got to figure out how we want to route that. This connects the Cummins harness to the essentially like the Ford harness. It's kind of like Ford ECU, Ford harness, all the stuff that the Ford ECU needs to see to think the engine's operating, and then the Cummins harness, and then the integration of those two. Yeah, but anyway, obviously this stuff isn't super cleanly routed right now. I'm just trying to kind of get everything going where it needs to go. Just going through this, plugging away, trying to get everything routed as best I can, and not put anything in the way of anything else. So one of those things takes a little bit of time. All right, we got most of the wiring completely routed. I've got one more thing to do. I've just basically got to do a 12-volt ignition to that relay over there. So I got the swap helper mounted up. I mounted it up here just to keep it away from water and moisture and heat and all that good stuff. All the other wiring is routed. I put my diagnostic port through the firewall, mounted it over here. I got my pedal converter box in. So basically it takes the signal from the Ford pedal and supplies it to the Dodge ECU. So it's got like 3 plugs and kind of goes in between and then goes out to the Dodge. So I got that in, mounted up, hooked up. That's done. I mean, we're almost done with the wiring here. Obviously, we'll still have to do battery cables, which I have. Just got to get those in and things like that. But we're close. We're close. Chipping away. All right, one thing we're going to change before I forget is this fuel control actuator. I had HP tuners pulled up when I first got this thing running, and the fuel pressure, the rail pressure was like 26,000 at idle, which it should be 5 to 6. All right, new fuel control actuator is in. Now, if that was our problem, it'll at least be fixed. All right, well, we have a few more things to finish up in the wiring department, but I think I'm gonna call it a day for today, for tonight. Either way, oh, that rhymed. Either way, I think I'm gonna call it for now. We're gonna pick this back up in the morning. Our last fuel line fitting should be here. So we can finish up the wiring, finish up our fuel system, make that finalized so we have fuel, and yeah, put some fuel in it, put some oil in it, trying to start it. So it's gonna be a big day, assuming I didn't forget about something that I need, that I don't have, that I can't get right away, which I don't know of any of those things, but with projects like this, you never know. You're always missing something. So anyway, hope to see you guys for that. But for now, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Goodbye.